Welcome to the Evolved Leadership Podcast, where we speak to business owners and executives who make the world a better place. You'll hear experienced and successful leaders share powerful stories and insights that will help you evolve as a leader in your own journey. Today, my guest is Brian Keane. Brian is the founder and CEO of Franchise Simply, a franchise consulting company that Brian runs with his wife, Prue. They provide expert consulting services and programs to business owners wanting to franchise their core business. Brian also founded and runs Microloan Foundation Australia, which is a microfinance charity that donates microloans to women in sub-Saharan Africa. And to date, through their foundation, Brian and Prue have helped over 355,000 women break free from cycles of effective slavery. Brian and Prue are business coaching clients of mine. As we've worked together, I've been blown away by the quality and comprehensive nature of the Franchise Simply program they've built over many years that reflects their combined decades of experience in the franchising space. Brian and Prue run regular events for their clients together with their team of experts, and it's my pleasure to present at their events on the topic of people and leadership. They are a truly delightful couple and a pleasure to coach. I really enjoyed this interview with Brian, where we delved into both his Franchise Simply business as well as the microloan charity he runs. Some of the highlights of the interview include our conversation around how to respond constructively as a business leader when disruptive, uncontrollable events occur that impact your marketplace, such as COVID, fuel hikes, and fluctuating interest rates. We discussed why Brian started Franchise Simply at a time when he and Prue had already retired from professional life. Towards the end of the show, Brian also explains the concept of giving through specific acts rather than just throwing money at a charity, and he explains how this concept works. And here's the interview. Brian, welcome to the show.
Dave, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much indeed.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. Is there anything you'd like to add? Did I miss anything important?
I suppose the fact I've been franchising for 40 years, we've just hit the 40-year mark, so it's
okay.
Which I think is interesting. Obviously, I've been around in the industry for a long time, and you just realise actually what you've seen happen during that period of time. And today's conversation about leadership sort of dovetails into that because things have changed so much over those years, and you just think of the points of influence that you had over a period of several decades. And Microloan Foundation's a bit the same. You know, it started by accident, and I got into business by accident, but I don't want to encroach on our storyline going forward. So
please encroach. Tell us, how did you get into business by accident?
Well, I mean, I don't want to tell you my life story, but I ended up in the middle of Africa. I was born in London. I ended up in the middle of Africa. I was about 22, something like that. And I was a quantity surveyor. I ended up working for a builder, and then an architect approached me and said, a partner of his had bought some land, would I start a building business and build 5 houses for them? I thought, oh well, yeah. So in those days the value of money was a bit different, and I had £500, and I ran around and found somebody who'd put in the figure to match it. So with £1,000 I started a business, and we ended up with a business of some significance, employing up to 100 odd people, I suppose. But I found out how to do it as I went. Very much.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So that was your first business.
Yeah, and in fact, while I was there in Malawi, opportunities come along. It's funny. I mean, I was in my early to mid 20s, and we noticed that there were people who had vehicles, large trucks, travelling from Zambia to Mozambique. There was Rhodesia, southern Rhodesia. At that stage, the borders were closed when they'd had UDI, Universal Declaration of Independence. So there were trucks carrying copper from the copper belt in Zambia through to Mozambique to the railhead or the shipping head. And so I thought, oh, that looks like a good idea. So I bought a couple of trucks, and before you know it, Tusker Transport was on the way.
Okay.
And both then the architect I've mentioned before said, why don't we start a swimming pool business and let's call it Crystal Pools. So I started a swimming pool business, and at the same time, a friend of mine I was sharing a house with said, "Hey, here's some opportunities for some importing tools and equipment and machinery. Let's get a business started." So I formed a business. He was the manager, and we called it Tesco, which you may recognise if you've been to the UK as one of their large supermarkets. This was tools and engineering supply company. So there I was with four businesses, and spent 10 years in that part of the world. Yeah, so and it was learning as I went. I can't say I had any great principles that I did. I mean, I just tried to keep things moving on a smooth keel, and I was very, very fortunate to have an amazing mentor. I've got an elderly gentleman who was an accountant, and if it weren't for him, I don't think any of those operations would have succeeded.
Yes.
Because he just gave me stability. He was an anchor, and he was very, very supportive, and he kept a handle on the cash. I mean, we didn't have an adding machine then. That was, actually before they were invented, electronic adding machines. So he did all the ledgers and everything by hand.
Right.
So that was it. And we had some fairly big jobs, running into quite large sizes, things like railway stations I built, and tobacco warehouses, and even down to squash courts and bush housing, you name it. So it was very interesting. Learned a lot quickly.
Well, you certainly match the description on various profiles online that you have of being a serial entrepreneur. And I know that was just the start for you, and it's there are a bunch of other businesses that you've run since then, and now your core work is helping other businesses that want to franchise. So I want to ask more about that soon. But I really would love to ask you to share what are some of the greatest challenges that you've faced. I mean, you just described some of the businesses that you've been involved with. In your leadership journey as a business leader, founder, franchisor at times, entrepreneur, what have been your biggest challenges, and how did you overcome them?
I suppose in the mid-70s, just before I left Malawi and came to Australia, there was the enormous fuel hike, which caused significant inflation. Petrol prices went through the roof, and that caused chaos with supplies and so on and so forth. So that was the first challenge, and the only thing we could do was to battle our way through it and try and save wherever we could, because it was very, very disruptive. So it did cause quite a lot of economic disruption around the world, in actual fact. So that was 74, 75. But subsequent to that, it's really been, I suppose there are several I can think of, and they say you learn from experience, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it's been painful. But when I came to Malawi, to Australia, started a building business after a while, a bit like I did the one in Malawi. Someone asked me if I'd build some houses for them. What happened there was in the early 80s, 80, 81, mortgage rates for domestic housing was around the 15%, and for investment property was 22, 23%.
Wow.
And
in Australia?
I was faced with in Australia, yeah. And I had some property I was developing with a couple of colleagues or friends, and we had no alternative but to try and bail out, because what happened at the same time, rather different to what's happening now, was property values plummeted. You couldn't sell property. So we ended up just bailing out, and I pulled out a building because there was no alternative. People were tendering below cost, and you're seeing it now with a couple of major building companies nationally going into administration because they can't handle the inflation. So it was generally just, I suppose I've tended to react reasonably quickly. I'm a bit of a bright, shiny object sort of person as well. So it was a matter of, okay, let's get out of the building, close it down. And that's what we did. There was because it was only going to be suffering. I managed to get out before things got, I suppose we maintained liquidity, and then moved into franchising, and that was a whole new leadership experience, which was quite fascinating. So that was when I was basically in business on my own, I suppose, with that 81, 82 meltdown. and then I suppose a subsequent one was Paul Keating's recession we had to have in 1991, 92. We've heard a lot about Bob Hawke recently with the biography being released, but that period through there was a real challenge. And I've used that as the blueprint for my thoughts and plans looking forward from here, because there was quite a surge. There was quite a surge in business once people got over that recession. I suppose it was a built-up sort of head of enthusiasm, of people looking for business opportunities, people who've been stifled, and that's just what's happening now. So I'm in talking to people at the moment, I'm finding even in the last few weeks, people getting lots of inquiries. Lots of businesses like the building trade are really, really busy, but it's going a lot further than that. And I think we're going to see a resurgence or an increase in small business. There are a lot of people who are looking for businesses, decided they've had enough. No doubt one of the things I was talking to Prue the other day, what do you think are the biggest changes happening this year? And I think, generally people have, if you like, sort of softened up. People are less stressed. They've decided they want to treat life a little bit more casually. And people want to do their own thing and they want control. So all this working from home has had huge impact. So, and then of course, then there was the GFC. At that stage, that was pretty harsh. I was involved with a public company, and we'd had an IPO and all that sort of thing. But basically, I suppose I bailed out of that because I saw that things were going to become untenable. So it was back to square one again for Brian. So that's been a little bit of my journey.
Okay. And did Franchise Simply begin after that?
Franchise Simply started about 12 years ago. I bailed out of the public company, retired up to a place called Nambucca Heads near Coffs Harbour, not far from where one of our daughters and 3 grandchildren were, near the beach, for a lovely lifestyle. After 12 months, Prue and I were scratching each other's eyes out. We were bored. We needed to be challenged. And I suppose, our core sort of entrepreneurial, I suppose, needs, if you like, there was a hunger to be doing something and getting satisfaction. And so we ended up saying, let's start another business. And we dabbled with a couple of small things. And then franchising I've been involved in for so long, it was a sort of something I gravitated to, I suppose. I do know a lot of people across the whole sector and have worked with lots and lots of people, big and small businesses, from Jim's Mowing to Donut Kings and so on. So what we did, we said, we actually went to a conference and we said, let's go online. The world's changing, everything's becoming digital. Although I've been lucky to be introduced to online in 91, 92, one of my work colleagues then was fairly savvy at IT. We had our own internet site and that sort of thing. So what we did was we said, Prue as the driver. She said, look, business is changing, consultancy is changing. No longer are people doing things the old way. It's moving into that online space. Let's create something quite different to convention, the way that people franchise their business. Let's document it. Let's put it into a process that people can follow so they can do it themselves. Basically, we built up a process of something like 29 steps in a number of modules with a number of videos, podcasts, which I still do, and did one with you recently, which I really enjoyed. Thanks, Dave. And I think yours was number 131.
It's a very interesting story of how you and Prue, ended up in Nambucca Heads, retired, and you lasted, a year, and you were really restless, and you just wanted to have something to challenge you, and you moved back into business, and Franchise Simply, you now, that's now your baby, and you run it. What is it about that gives you meaning? For some people, retirement is everything. Having the ability to kick back and not have to work again and just travel or lounge on the beach for the rest of their days. That's their vision for life. So what is it about what you've decided to do, which is to be in business and a busy business? And I know the demands on your time for both of you through our conversations. Why do you do this? what is it about it that gives you meaning?
Yeah, that's interesting. The short and simple answer is I just realised years ago when I was in Malawi and had a carpenter that I sort of helped get a better idea of things, and he said, "Well, no, I'm going off to run my own business." I said, "Jairus, congratulations. Anything I can do to help." The satisfaction from seeing people do that is immense, and that's what I found with franchising was helping other people is really satisfying. And then that led me into Microloan Foundation. And from Prue's point of view, she comes from a very high executive level in public service, had her own businesses as well. But she was at director level in a large corporation, public corporation, and so forth. So we've both been very involved in achieving things, not necessarily because we set out to achieve anything particular, because that's what we've enjoyed and that's what we do well, I believe. So that's what gave us the drive to do it. And I think you read a lot about this business about older people, if you like, and the problems they have getting employment. We have to find a solution to that, because I certainly feel, from my point of view, no constraints because of the fact that I'm a few decades older than the average executive, perhaps. No reason why I can't contribute as much as anybody. And I suppose we're both, Prue and I, are physically fit. So getting that satisfaction and be able to, I suppose, the double-edged, or the benefit that we get is with Microloan Foundation, that when we help people grow their business here in Australia, at the same time, because of that, we're able to support Microloan Foundation and help women in Africa start their own business. So there's a very similar parallel. We're helping entrepreneurs in both places, and that's just it's just fulfilling. It's satisfying. It's quietly satisfying, I suppose you'd say. And quite humbling.
And that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the primary reasons I invited you to be a guest on the show is that the Microloan Foundation that you guys run is a very tangible way of giving back and uplifting humanity, making the world a better place. And I want to ask a bit more about that shortly. Before I do, please give us your thoughts. From your 40 years of experience. You just gave us a rundown of the various critical points. Particularly the times of financial stress, the GFC, the Paul Keating recession, etc. You've been through all that, and you've had to respond. Here we are, 2022. COVID restrictions, appearing to come to an end, and small businesses having great difficulty, through that, particularly in the travel industry and retail. But here we are with things appearing to open up again. What do you see over the next 5 years are the challenges, and the opportunities that small business leaders are going to need to prepare for?
I think the biggest one is IT. I really believe that. I think that any leader, CEO in a business, doesn't matter what the size of the business is, needs now to have a fundamental understanding of IT. It's not good enough to have somebody producing the information for you, because it's so incredibly powerful and there's so many applications available. It's just staggering each year when you look at the new applications that have popped up, what they can do. I think to be an effective CEO or leader with a long-term business, you need to really be on top of that and understand it. It's no good having somebody briefing you. So I think it's, and that's fine for people currently, the sort of millennials who were brought up with a laptop in their hand and that type of thing. But that doesn't mean just because you're younger that you're necessarily on top of IT, obviously. But
when you say IT, do you mean how to navigate digital marketing? How to set up a website? Like what does that include when you use the term IT?
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, I don't mean setting it up physically, but understanding the power of it, what it does, and how it works. So understanding when you're talking about creating email flows and so forth, just what you can do and how effective it can be. And the various apps that are out there, you can never pretend you're going to know all the apps, but you need to have surround yourself with people or have access to people who really know and understand contemporary applications, because there are businesses now that are built almost entirely on apps, on online stuff. You know, I'm working at the moment with a building company. I could never have imagined this, but they don't actually produce anything. They build, you know, they do garages, extensions, decks, all that sort of thing. But it's all packaged up in a factory and sent out for do it yourself for the people, and then they provide local builders to go in and do the installation if people want it. You know,
That's great.
So the office it's an office where there are people just in the building industry. They're just sitting there working on their laptops, generating business. So now that follows really well across it. Anyone who's in his space as a competitor and not got those skills, their days are limited.
Yes.
And I think it applies to most businesses, to be honest.
You're talking about understanding systems that are available today, like cutting-edge systems that help to optimize your business and your offering. And you know, there are so many incredible things that have been developed, and a lot of them, you know, do come in the form of an app, but not only apps, which, you know, just make it a lot easier to communicate your message and promote your product or service, you know, to your market. And yeah, that's a great example of your building client, you know, using his knowledge that he's acquired of technology. I mean, I would use the term technology because IT, I sort of imagine, you know, the IT department sitting helping people with their email server problems.
Yes, because my view at the moment is that probably 80% of businesses out there would be very, very lucky to survive 3 to 5 years because they're just behind the 8 ball. And if we've seen how, you know, the application of IT, one way or another, has changed in the last 5 to 10 years, and 10 years ago we thought it was advanced, and we look at it today, I shudder to even try and think where it will be in 5 to 10 years' time, with all these geniuses out there promoting all these sorts of things. You know, you only look at, you know, Australian examples with Canva and Trello and these, you know, see what these people have done. It's mind-blowing. And for lots of businesses, some of those things are absolutely essential, or without them, you're struggling using lots of manpower that could otherwise be reduced to a minimal cost. And when I talked to John O'Brien, who's the founder CEO of Poolworks, for example, the first person he put on once he got 2 or 3 franchisees with his pool cleaning franchises was a systems analyst. Yeah, that's rare to hear that, but the reality is there you've got 2 shining lights of Australian business that are, no doubt about it, world leaders.
So, Brian, you know, technology is one thing. What else in terms of the next 5 years that you see small business, medium-sized business owners need to be really preparing for?
I know through my sort of career, it's mentors here and there that have made huge impact.
Yeah.
Because they can see things from a different perspective, which is why I enjoy talking to you, Dave, from the point of view of coaching.
That's right, and without it, what might you have missed out on? You know, that can come up in a coaching conversation or coaching relationship. You know, and I've experienced that countless times with clients that, you know, at a certain point in the coaching program, there's an insight and an idea and an opportunity that comes out that leads to something really big, a really big new project that my client had no idea, you know, and didn't, you know, wasn't at all speaking about when we, you know, initially began. And that's, you know, that is the beauty of coaching, that new things can be created that weren't there before. Brian, you know, you don't just run Franchise Simply, you also founded and you run the Microloan Foundation, you know, which I want to ask about now, and you run that with your wife Prue also. And you know, that was the original the original way that you and I connected. Is, you know, I actually saw the information and I reached out to you, and our relationship began. And I love that you said, one of your reasons for running the business that you do is it gives you the ability to give back through the Microloan Foundation, which otherwise, you wouldn't be able to make the donations that you do each year. So can you tell us a bit more about that? This charity that you run, which to date has significantly impacted 355,000 women in sub-Saharan Africa to get out of cycles of slavery. Tell us more about that. What are some of the stories?
Well, I suppose
that you've heard through your work.
Yeah, I suppose if I go to founding the business, when I was looking at retiring some years ago, one of the things I wanted to do was to make some provision for helping people in Africa, and I knew I wanted to help women because I know that the women will spend the money on the family, whereas a male is more inclined to spend it on a bicycle or down the pub or whatever it might be. They don't have the same drive. It's just a gender thing. It's as simple as that. And I looked for organisations. I couldn't find anything, and I came up with one in the UK called Microloan Foundation, and I don't know. I just got I got chatting to them, and I couldn't find anything in Australia of the scale that I wanted. There's lots of charities out there, vast numbers, but who actually made an impact and spent the money that people trusted them with. And so I approached, I happened to be over in London for a Malawi reunion, went and met the guy who founded Microloan Foundation, delightful guy called Peter Ryan. We hit off, really, really well. I said, can I franchise Microloan Foundation in Australia?
Yes.
And he said,
you just can't stop yourself, Brian.
And he said,
you have to franchise whatever you see.
Yeah. So we operate this entity here, and we raise funds for that go to Africa. But I'm proud to say that around 95% of the money that we raise actually ends up in the hands of women, helping them run their business. And then 99% of the loans we give them, which vary between $50 and $75, 99% of that is repaid. It's phenomenal. In a matter of 3 to 4 months. So it's that impact. So they probably get better training than most people in Australia. I'm not involved in that side. The UK organisation set the infrastructure up, but it's all using local Indigenous people. There are no expatriates over there driving white Range Rovers or anything like that. Our first office manager over there in Malangi in southwest Malawi, southeast Malawi, I beg your pardon, was our first office that we set up there. It was John on a bicycle, and he was the loan officer, the trainer, and they trained. So, for example, there's one woman, Catherine. She got a loan about 7 or 8 years ago. She lived near the lake shore there. There's a large lake in Malawi where people do fishing, and she had a little grocery shop. She grew that store, started off just being out of her lounge window almost. She opened up a shop, and then her husband was working as a fisherman for somebody else. She ended up with the funds to buy a boat, employed her husband to run the boat, and has scaled it up to the point where she's got about 4 sort of houses, not quite hotels, but living quarters, plus a fleet of some number of boats. And she's done all that from basically a $50 loan. I think she employs about 40 odd people. So invariably these people are amazing entrepreneurs given the opportunity. It just highlighted to me, it doesn't matter where in the world you are, there are people there that given the opportunity will just create amazing things, and it's nice to see that happen. And that's really a large part of what drives us, is to keep that going, to maintain that momentum.
Yeah. And I know that one of your goals would be to get a little bit more time to work on the Microloan Foundation Australia. And just to explain to listeners, it is quite a normal way of structuring things in the microfinance world. There's the global Microloan Foundation, and Brian and Prue run Microloan Foundation Australia, which is the Australian branch of Microloan Foundation globally. So, anything else on the Microloan Foundation, Brian, and particularly in the future, where do you see that going? Is it going to be a certain amount each year that is donated? Which I know you do have sort of an amount that gets donated each year. Are you happy for that to stay as it is? Do you have goals of growing that figure, or even changing how it impacts in any way? What is your vision for Microloan Foundation Australia?
Well, we need, at the moment it's just it's voluntary. I do the odd hours here and there, and so does our CEO Clive Hughes down in Sydney. He's a retired accountant. Prue does a little bit of work on it, and our business pays for most of the expenses. But I would like to see, we need somebody in certainly as a part-time sort of CEO running the business, and we need someone to be running fundraising, which was what I saw my role was knocking on the door of foundations and corporates and so forth. The people out there that are happy to contribute, have funds and so on. So it's taking it to the next stage, but it's not easy to find people who I suppose motivated to invest the time and that sort of thing. And because we're so small, you can't really afford to pay anybody. It's a bit like a small business challenge, really. So we raise generally around, I think we average about 70,000 a year that we send over. Occasionally someone will have a fundraising for something and nominate us as the beneficiary. So this year I think we raised 95, which was a record. So it's raising awareness among people. And the biggest thing I think in the last 5 years has been in business, an awareness that community is not just something to patronise locally and support your local soccer club. It's actually to do something meaningful for the world at large. And whether that's in Australia or whether it's overseas, I don't think it matters. We're a global entity. If we're helping people anywhere, everyone's helping themselves ultimately. So I think seeing a responsible sort of role, I suppose. So we look at the Richard Bransons and so forth, who've done enormous amounts over the years and inspired a lot of other people as well. It's part of their DNA. And people like Warren Buffett, amazing examples, enormous wealth, but contributing absolutely enormous eye-watering amounts. Bill Gates and so forth. So the fact is that small businesses can have the same impact, by contributing to charities, such as Microloan Foundation or an organisation that supports us called B1G1. That I would encourage anyone to look at. They're amazing, and just helping people in underdeveloped areas. But there are ways of doing that in a fairly painless way, where we've got people every time they sell a business coaching program, they send us $75 because they're going to sponsor a woman start her own business. So there's a synergy. The thing with that, I think, in business is actually relating it to specific acts. If you can say each time we have a conversation, so our sort of cash flow budgeting guru at Franchise Simply, Jeremy Harris, every time he has a meeting with someone, he plants like 50 trees in India or somewhere, things of that nature. So it's actually designated. So that's becoming more
any meeting.
Broad. Yeah, any meeting.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. He does it. If he sends an email to somebody, he will have a donation go to some particular thing.
Like
maybe a meal.
Any action he takes, he makes some form of donation. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
How cool.
Look, it doesn't have to be significant, through things like B1G1 or Micro, and you can donate $1. It doesn't have to be a lot, but as long as it goes through a funnel to a responsible organisation and gets spent in the way that it's intended, then it does the trick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's lots of tools you can use.
I can imagine Jeremy's one to get on the phone and not send countless back and forward emails, or he'll have to constantly donate dollars within the space of a few minutes of 10 emails back and forward.
Yeah.
So for listeners who would like to get in touch today, do you have anything that in particular you'd like to let them know? And for those who'd like to get in touch, how can they contact you?
Sure. I'll probably perhaps just give you my direct phone line. I've got a 1300 number, but you can ring me on 0417 211 366. That's 0417 211 366. But if you're interested in learning a bit about the business side of things, franchisesimply.com.au. I've got a free book we can post you out. And if you're interested in Microloan Foundation, just go to the website. We've actually got a new website coming up. So right at this minute, so we're talking here in, beginning of March 2022, we've just got a couple of pages, but we will have a lovely hot new website up within a matter of weeks. But go there and have a look, and you can see what we do and so forth. And then Systems to Grow, we're just launching that. That's systems numeral2 grow.com. And you're welcome any time for a consultation. We're always happy to chat to people and go from there.
Thank you very much. Brian, we're at time, but it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for sharing your experience, your stories, and your wisdom today. I'm very grateful.
No, thank you, David. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about how you can evolve as a leader, go to evolvestrategy.com.au and enjoy our wide range of articles and resources, as well as our other great podcast episodes.